I think Americans want this over. There's so many people that are suffering right now. It's costing a lot of people $100 just to fill up a tank of gas. It's costing groceries, more fertilizer, more. This is pretty devastating economically, so we hope this works out. I've got to say, Jonathan, though, no other president would enter into a cease deal like this. This is so much weaker than what even Barack Obama was talking about. A deal that Donald Trump just has eviscerated for years, but they had, again, the top experts just hammering through the details of a nuclear deal for months, building up to it for years. And here, we're just sort of winging it and hoping that the Iranians are going to behave in good faith. I just don't know how this would work in the end, and I can't see how the president would even accept this deal, because at the end of the day, what's he walking away with? He's walking away with a nuclear Iran. There are 1,000 times he said Iran can't have nuclear weapons. And talk to anybody that's dealt with Iran before, and what will they tell you? That, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and they won't give up their nuclear weapons. Why would they hear?
Yeah, this agreement is so weak. The fact that the president is even considering it suggests how desperate he is to simply move on from all things Iran. And let's be clear, more than anything, this is simply an extension of the ceasefire. This isn't really a deal. It is an MOU. And yes, it theoretically would open up the Strait of Hormuz. That would be the one significant piece and the one thing that would be a win, let's say, for Americans. But even that has lots of caveats. Let's see if it stays open. Iran has shown they have the ability to menace that strait at any time, including in this past week. We have seen spasms of violence along that key waterway. But everything else, at least in this MOU, is pro-Tehran. The nuke stuff is kicked down the road. As Richard said, there's nothing about the proxies. Certainly there hasn't been any sort of regime change. In fact, the hardliners are more emboldened now. And I'm told within the White House that President Trump does have some misgivings. He's not committed just yet to fully signing this. He did hear from all those GOP hawks over the last few days, the Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, even Roger Wicker and the like, saying, look, you can't take a deal like this. We know, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want him to. But Trump is, confident, I'm told, in his ability to sell any sort of deal as a win. And Mika, we know that he's very good. It's a superpower of President Trump to sort of assert his own reality, to convince his supporters, don't believe your eyes, believe what I'm telling you. But it's going to be tested anew here, because this is so far from what he pledged would happen at the beginning of the war. And the U.S. and this president would look remarkably weak in the Middle East and around the world.
And am I right? We haven't heard from Iran on exactly where they stand on this.
That's correct. So. Some reporting they're considering it too, but we don't know everything.
Factor. Let's bring in former National Security Advisor under President Biden, Jake Sullivan. Jake, thanks for coming on. 3 months in, what would it realistically take for a deal to hold? And what do you make of what we've heard so far about this one?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I think Joe's absolutely right. This is the umpteenth time we've heard we're very close to a deal. But every time we hear this, the terms get a little better for Iran. So I think the important thing is to step back and look at where we were before this started. The Strait of Hormuz was open. Iran's leadership, its regime, was under enormous pressure at home. And there was a nuclear deal on the table that was stronger than what is on the table now. Then we started this war. Gas prices went up, Americans died, the strait closed, and the end of this looks like Iran is going to maintain at least de facto control of the strait with the ability to shut it down when it wants. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard hardliners are in charge of the country, as you just heard. And there's some reporting that suggests that even to get any nuclear concessions, which are still speculative, the United States is going to have to promise Iran upwards of $300 billion in investment in Iran. I remember when Barack Obama was attacked for a $1.7 billion payment, and now we're talking about $300 billion. So the net of all of this, I think, is a huge strategic setback for the United States, a significant gain for Iran. But the reason I think President Trump is looking at taking this deal is, what's his alternative? He does not have a good alternative. He tried to bomb Iran, he tried to blockade Iran, he tried to bully Iran, and he is stuck. So this may be the best of the very bad outcomes available to him, and it just shows you what a misbegotten war this was from the beginning.
Jake, you were obviously one of the architects of the JCPOA, the 2015 Iran deal in the Obama administration, which has been criticized by Republicans for more than a decade now. I'm just curious, and you touched on it briefly there, if you can give us a little bit of a side-by-side of what you all had in place and what is on the table right now. What's that comparison look like?
Well, if they actually are able to negotiate a nuclear agreement based on this MOU, and you guys have been right that remains very much open to question, but if they are, some of the elements will look very similar to the JCPOA. A cap on enrichment for a certain period of time, the disposition of some part of the stockpile. Under the Biden or the Obama administration, the stockpile was reduced by 97%. And it was taken out of the country and downblended so that Iran couldn't have it at all. Right now, we're talking about much of that stockpile remaining in the country. And then there is the essential question that Richard Haass put on the table, inspectors. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action had 150 plus pages of meticulous requirements for monitoring and verification of every commitment Iran made, inspectors all over the country, and this deal does not have that.
Yeah, you know, Richard, we're talking about, again, a president who is being asked to agree to a deal that I think will continue to have Republicans in his own party. And I think most everybody that's concerned about the future of this country, deeply, deeply concerned just because he wants to get a deal. You actually, if you have, I know you've been talking to people in the Trump administration. I have. Over last administration and this administration, and I have during the Biden administration, and they all talked about the mistakes that the Biden administration made, taking their foot off the gas as far as it goes with sanctions. Oh, they've rebuilt their terrorism networks because Biden wasn't tough enough on clamping down on the sanctions, but we're going to be different. Well, we're talking right now. Instead of a $1.4 billion, I don't know, pallets in cash or whatever, we're talking about a $300 billion windfall that the Iranians are going to make out of this war. Think about that. A $300 billion slush fund that Donald Trump would be giving terrorists and everybody in the terror networks. $300 billion. So you'd have a slush fund for terrorists, you'd have a slush fund for Hamas, you'd have a slush fund for Hezbollah, you'd have a slush fund for Iran. It's just like the slush fund for cop beaters and the January 6th cop beaters relief fund they're talking about doing. I don't see how Donald Trump gives $300 billion to the Iranians just because he started a war that he couldn't finish.
But again, I think as Jay correctly said, what are his choices at this point, Joe? You know, the deal you can get the Iranians to accept, or what? You're not going to get regime change. You're not going to get Iranian capitulation. So just say he does what the finish the job gang wants him to do. It's a slogan, not a strategy. So what? He resumes bombing against what? The only meaningful targets we haven't really gone after is the Iranian energy infrastructure. Kind of a problem, though. If we do that, guess what Iran's going to do? They're going to go after the energy infrastructure of every one of its neighbors. And as bad as this crisis is, that would make this look like a tea party. Because then you would see the long-term destruction of 20% or even more of the world's oil and gas capabilities. So, you know, what is Donald Trump going to do? I think also, Joe, a lot of this returns the question. I mean, you know, what you and Jake think about this is, you know, we had a moment. The president keeps saying we can't allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Okay, everybody agrees on that. But we had an enormous opportunity both to lock that in and to bring about regime change after June. That was when Iran was at its weakest after the Israeli and American strikes. And rather than taking advantage of that and trying to press diplomatically and turn up the economic heat, we ultimately moved towards this war. So you keep coming back to that. We are going to end up. The only question I have is how much worse off are we now than we were before this war began? Donald Trump's going to have to spin it. He's going to say we're better off. But quite honestly, no one who has an ounce of objectivity is going to agree with him.